A percentage lease is an agreement in commercial real estate where the tenant pays rent plus a percentage of their earned business revenue. Knowing the different types of leases and how they work is essential for the real estate exam, and luckily, if you're studying for the real estate exam, you're in the right place. Hello everybody, it's Zach here from realestatelicensewizard.com. Today, we're talking about percentage leases. Let's get started. So what is a percentage lease? Well, a percentage lease is an agreement where the tenant pays rent plus a portion of their business profits. In this type of lease, the landlord benefits from the tenant's success. Percentage leases are standard in commercial real estate, particularly in retail. If a tenant is renting out a space for their business in a multi-tenant property, the owner may have them sign this type of lease. Examples of properties where a retail tenant may agree to a percentage lease would be shopping malls, shopping centers, outlets, or really any multi-tenant rental space. Now, what terms are covered in these percentage leases? Well, really three things. One, base rent. 2, break-even point, and then 3, percentage rate. So I'm going to break these each down because they're important to really understand. So what is base rent? Well, base rent is the price tenants pay to occupy a rental space. The square footage of the property typically determines the rent amount. No matter how much the tenant earns in revenue, the rent price is guaranteed and unchanging. Even if the tenant makes no money from their business, the landlord will collect this base rent cost, because again, that's the bare minimum. Next is that break-even point. Now, the break-even point, also known as breakpoint, is the income a tenant earns before paying a percentage of their sales to the landlord. Landlords typically identify the break-even point as the point where the percentage rent is equivalent to the base rent. And then obviously there's the percentage rent. The percentage rent is the amount a tenant must pay from their gross sales to the landlord. Now, the percentage of rent varies from lease to lease, but it's typically a flat percentage above the break-even point. Both the landlord and tenant must choose a percent that makes sense and works for both of them. For example, the landlord and tenant may agree that the percentage rate will apply to 8% of gross sales above the break point. This means that after the tenant's business earns the amount defined in break point, they pay 8% of all their other profits. So what terms are included in a percentage lease? Well, it looks pretty much like a standard lease. I'll put them on the screen, but essentially, again, you're going to have the names of the tenants, the property description, the length of the term, any, potential deposits, fees, legal rights, disclosures and restrictions, things like that. So what's an example of a percentage lease? Well, say that Kamel owns a clothing store and wants to rent a space for her business in a mall. Kamel signs a percentage lease to the landlord, agreeing to pay $4,000 rent for a space at the mall. Per the agreement, she must also give 7% of her profits after earning a break point of $8,000. This is a typical example of how a percentage lease might work in the retail market. So let's discuss some of the pros and cons. So for tenants, a percentage lease can be deemed attractive because it requires paying lower base rent. Landlords have a vested interest in the tenant's business, so they will likely provide maintenance and other services. It is also more likely that the tenant's business will be in a good location like a mall or shopping center. The downside for tenants is that they may have to negotiate to get the best terms. Landlords naturally try to set terms that favor themselves, so tenants must know how to haggle. Another downside of the percentage lease is that tenants cannot keep all their profits. They are required to give that percentage of their earnings at the end of that month or quarter or whatever it might be to the landlord. Now, for landlords, a significant advantage of percentage lease is that they get a portion of the tenant's earnings. As long as the business is doing well, the landlord will make passive income without having to do anything necessarily extra. Now, one disadvantage of a percentage lease for landlords is that they have to charge a lower base rent. If a tenant's business is not doing well, landlords will not make as much money from this lease. It also takes landlords more time to make money with percentage leases, as the tenant must reach that break point before they can make any earnings. Of course, landlords also have to worry about potentially a tenant not accurately reporting their income and things like that. Whereas with a standard lease, you don't have to worry about all those extra things. So how do we calculate a percentage lease? Well, it's pretty easy. There's really three things: percentage rent, gross sales, and then square footage of the rental property. Put the equation on the screen for you. That's essentially what it looks like. Again, percentage rent times gross sales and then you're going to divide by 12, obviously for the month, and then that's going to find us the price per square foot. So what specifically do you need to know for the real estate exam? Well, obviously you need to be familiar with the term percentage lease. A percentage lease is an agreement where the tenant pays base rent plus a percentage of sales to the property owner. Remember, it's one of those essential lease types that you just need to understand because, again, they like to give you an example and you have to pick which lease type makes the most sense in this situation. If you can understand that and distinguish which is a percentage lease, which is a gross lease, all these things that we've been talking about, you'll be one step closer to passing the real estate exam. For more videos on leases and lease types, click here and click here to subscribe. Thank you guys so much for watching. Until next time, see ya. Bye-bye.